to the Connect the Dots podcast. Jeffrey Klein has conversations with a diverse array of successful people, sharing their stories to educate, inspire, and entertain. Here is your host, Jeffrey.
My guest today is Maika Isogawa, the CEO of Webacy, the protection layer for self-custody. Webacy develops tools and services to make self-custody safer and easier. Maika is also a former professional acrobat and performer for the Cirque Du Soleil brand of shows. She attended Stanford University and was specializing in artificial intelligence. Maika was most recently a cybersecurity engineer for Microsoft and is a Forbes 30 under 30. Welcome, Maika.
Thank you for having me.
So I like to start at the beginning. Where were you born and what did your parents do for a living?
I was born in a small town around 40 minutes from central Tokyo. It was called Musashi Kogane in Japan. And my father is an engineer. And now he has worked at the same company for 30 years and is now like a director at level at that place. And my mother, she was a cross-cultural educator. So she taught Japanese here in the United States and English in Japan, and then had a variety of odd jobs and is now flipping homes for fun.
I love it. So you've done so many crazy things, cool things in a relatively short time. I'm curious, when you're growing up, when did you leave Japan?
So we moved from Japan to the United States, to Minnesota, actually, when I was 5. And then we went back and forth until I was around 10.
And in that kind of 5 to 10 year span, if someone had said to you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
I think as a child, I used to answer a princess rather than some sort of job or anything like that. It was the role of being a princess. But I think for a while, I was really into astrophysics. I used to watch the History Channel on traditional network TV and watch all those kinds of shows. So something in the physics world.
Yeah, and I read that you actually, instead of high school, were kind of going to the University of Minnesota studying physics. So it's clear that you are very unintelligent and no interest in anything scientific or anything like that.
It's
it's
useless. Yeah.
So growing up, you had, your father was an engineer, and cross-cultural, I think, is really fascinating. And obviously you were saying you had this interest. Did you have certain role models that you looked up to and you saw people doing something like, oh, that would be cool, or that gave you, a window into the possibility of opportunity?
Totally. Yeah, I think rather than maybe one hero that some people could see like on TV or whatnot, I found the people that I looked up to within my circles. So growing up early on, it was my father, of course, watching him work all the time and seeing his dedication. But then even the circles growing up in school. So maybe an older classmate or someone who was at the same circus training school who was much older and better than I was. So in these circles, whatever I was focused on, there was always someone who I could look up to and kind of grow and learn from. And so that's continued to today too.
So you mentioned the circus training. When did that start and how did that develop?
So I was 11. I was living in St. Paul, Minnesota. Well, I was in Eagan, Minnesota, actually, at that time. Funny enough, Minnesota has one of the largest youth circuses in the United States and in North America, pretty much. So it's for kids, instead of going to soccer practice after school, you go to circus training practice. And so I did a summer camp when I was around 11 or 12, and then started getting more and more into it over time.
And was Cirque du Soleil as much of the kind of creme de la creme growing up that I was like, wow, if I could go one day work for them, that would be the dream, or was it not quite that articulated in terms of what this would lead to?
So Cirque du Soleil back then, it was more so even than today. I think today things have kind of changed with, the buying and selling of the company and the level of what the company is at. It's still very much a spectacular company. But back then when I was younger, it was more of like, wow, that's a dream to someday be able to work for them. It wasn't necessarily a goal though. I think there's a difference, especially when you're a child growing up. I wasn't putting my intentions into trying to become a professional circus performer by whatsoever, but it would be cool to be one. That's kind of the situation where it was.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen multiple shows of theirs and blown away by and the incredible talent of the performers. It's interesting that I love that idea of a dream, not a goal. Like that, it's almost like when you make it a goal, it becomes almost not as fun, And I like the idea of pursuing things that are fun. Do you think there's as a kind of you reference on your website of being kind of a jack of all trades and between being an ultimate frisbee competitor, concentrating in AI, being an acrobat, working for Microsoft. Like, is there a theme that you see that kind of threads all these disparate kind of things together?
That's a tough one. I think they're very different things. I think one very clear one is that I'm extremely competitive with myself, right? So always having to improve, never being totally fulfilled with what I've achieved. And so maybe that's both a blessing and a curse for my lifetime, but it seems to be reflected in all the things I choose to do.
And I thought of this question earlier when I was thinking about, do you think robots will eventually replace humans?
Haven't they already? No, it's ominous, but really, like, even the manufacturing plants that we look at today, and ChatGPT, not to throw out another buzzword thing coming out here, but there are many, many instances where robots have already replaced us. And so it's kind of a matter of time, but we will keep evolving so that they don't replace us fully, hopefully.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious, ChatGPT is pretty wildfire at the moment with everyone thinking, both worried and excited and about what it can do and what it might do. My perspective has kind of been that AI is a tool like many other technologies that you need the human element, maybe to use it for good or evil. I don't think about it that way, but and to use it effectively. What are you studied AI? What are your thoughts on what the use cases in terms of whether controlling it? Can you control? Is there a point where AI becomes becomes its own thing and the human element no longer plays a part, or is it that you said that humans are evolving to stay one step ahead of it? That seems a little arrogant in some ways. It's a technology that might take over us, but
Right.
maybe that's just my sci-fi movie that I've seen too many.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possible futures when it comes to AI. I think if I'm thinking back to 5 or 10 years ago with the AI movies that came out, we're not quite there yet. They haven't fulfilled the promises that they gave me about these AIs that could be full virtual assistants, but we're getting close. I agree with you on the sentiment that AI is a tool. Already, I think that AI is useful for all kinds of things, like speeding up our writing processes, not necessarily writing it for us, but maybe creating a structure, right? Which we don't need to spend our time doing 100% anyways, or coming up with new ideas and iterating through something that we might not have thought of. A lot of people have been using ChatGPT, interestingly, to verify opinions that they have, or maybe argue against them when they're practicing for something. So it's actually quite interesting to see how people are starting to adapt the use of ChatGPT, and I think it's only going to get more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think someone who's a content creator, it's really interesting. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna thing where I'm just gonna go, oh, here, go and create, but it's gonna get me there faster and potentially with more possibility for me then to input what it is. And again, you got to ask it the prompt. You got to still be the one who's coming up with the initial inquiry. And I think that's where there's always going to be a human element. And then when I think about connecting with an audience, human emotion is sophisticated, and I see how AI technology is starting to get, it's taking the inputs and getting closer, but I'm not sure it will ever replicate those true kind of human emotions that are so important. But we'll see. Speaking of human emotions and the sanctity of all that, tell me about how you came up with the idea of Webacy and what was the motivation behind that, and what your hope is that it will do.
Webacy came from a variety of things. I think I've talked about this a few times before, but there was a personal element, and then there was a very logical, this space needs help, this space has opportunity for a solution to come and enter the space kind of situation. So on the personal side, I had a family member pass away, and then they were quite young. And I think I was having this existential realization about how our lives are changing and becoming more digital. And then on the other hand, on that same note, by realizing our assets and our lives are becoming more digital, I knew that all of the problems we have in our traditional world when it comes to managing, protecting, even passing on after you pass away, those were only going to get worse in Web3 and the future of digital assets management if we didn't do something to build on this new system. So that's where Webacy came from. And our very first product was kind of a crypto-focused product, and that's where we found our niche as a company. But the vision and my belief is that eventually a lot of assets and digital assets will be represented, whether on blockchain or something very similar to blockchain. So having technology that helps manage that in a more modern way is going to be very useful in the future.
Yeah, and again, it's about using technology for something very important to people. I'm working with a company right now called Penserita, which is basically similar in that their goal is to preserve the legacy, whether it's photographs or videos or things. And it's even now, when I look at the things that I have of my children, as opposed to what my grandparents had, and the fact that I would love to have some more of that. And, I get old photos that my brother just scanned, and it's like technology is getting to the place where it should be easier to manage them. I mean, not say easier, it should be simpler, but not easier. And so that's why the tool needed to then take all this information, because there's too much of it, and make sense of it. And I love that idea. I've had people, it's interesting, people who have passed away, I've seen on Facebook that their page lives on as kind of a memorial. And I think that's how I see Webacy from my perspective. The little I know about it is one of the ways that it'll be really useful is to be able to honor, beloved family members in ways that everyone can, that they're still part of your life. And I think, for me, I think, and don't get too deep in this, about death is, when someone passes away, I really believe in celebrating their life, rather than getting sad for, there's, it's a mixed bag for sure. But I love the idea of celebrating someone who's been important to your life, in lots of different ways.
Absolutely.
So you've traveled, all over the world for different things, being born in a different country. So far in your life, when you think about, the most surprising place you found yourself, either a geographic location or speaking to someone, is there some place you're like, wow, I would have never thought I would be talking to this person or in this location, that you're just surprised by that happening?
Oh yeah. I think probably everyone has had some sort of out of body experience where something is so wild that's happening that you just can't imagine yourself in your own body. So you disassociate and you see yourself externally. That's happened a number of times so far. And I hope it'll continue happening, because it means I'm in places that are shocking to myself. But I mean, so for example, one was we performed in Sochi, Russia for a bit as part of Cirque, and just the fact that, now things are a little bit more different with the political dynamics, but I never thought I'd ever find myself in Russia. And to be there on the Black Sea in the summertime, hanging out with friends on the border of like Russia and other countries, it was just a very surreal kind of feeling. And that happened multiple times during Cirque. And then even back at school, listening to entrepreneurs that are very famous right in front of you in a observatory room, speaking to your class of 20, right? And so these are just kind of moments where I find myself very grateful to be able to live this life of excitement and experience. But yeah, no, there's been definitely a few moments like that.
And if you're in the grand scheme relatively young, 30 under 30, it seems when people read about all this amazing things you've accomplished, you've done quite a bit. But you also have very distinct variety of interests. And, I think growing up, I was one like, oh, you should be an expert. And I was not. I was more of a generalist. And so I'm curious, if you think about it now, what advice you'd give to people who may have multiple interests and trying to figure out which one to pursue and how to figure all that out. Any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me young, because I feel so old every day, especially I'm surrounded by, 19, 20-year-olds that are extremely successful and brilliant around me. So thank you. Yeah, I think I do. I think I still even struggle with this too, having a variety of interests, and to really make something great, you have to focus your energies. And so I've learned to pick the things that I know that I can continue working on without getting distracted. But earlier I couldn't do that because I had so much I wanted to pursue. And so I think what I discovered through my self-discoveration journey, to use that word again, was that you're not going to be happy in life unless you're working on something that's very interesting to you and exciting to you. So I don't think anyone should feel the pressure to pick one thing and only focus on that if that's not going to make them happy, right? And so as long as you're able to feed yourself, take care of your health and your family, right? There's no benchmark to compare yourself against, and that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned.
Yeah, I teach at a university, undergraduate students, and one of the things I try and share with them, and any one kind of who's on their way exploring their career, there's a great Venn diagram, which is things you love, things you're good at, and things that enable you to afford whatever it is. And that you have to really find that middle thing, because If you find something you love and you're really good at, but it doesn't pay, you'll be happy but poor. If you find something you're really good at and pays lots of money, but doesn't make you happy, you'll be rich and unhappy. And if you find something that pays a lot of money and you really love it, but you have no skill there, well, then you're just dreaming. So I think that, that real sweet spot is finding that thing. And I love the idea of, do what you love and you don't really work, a day in your life. There's quotes like that. And as much as it's kind of a cliche, I think I've been blessed that I grew up with my parents saying, you gotta get up. You spend a lot of time at work, you gotta get up and want to go to work and love what you do. And it's sad because there's so many people who don't. The rate of disengagement across the workforce, it continues to be really high. And I think it's important to remind people you have a choice, and you can pursue things. One of the challenges I think, I have young children two that are about to go to university, figuring out what that thing is, because there are so many options now. And I think that's one of the flip side of being able to pursue what you love is you have to figure out what it is you love. And I think the answer is probably try lots of things until but it's yeah. And I definitely agree with if you don't focus to some degree, you'll never master anything. And the idea of mastery, I think, is pretty cool. And for something to be successful, you got to focus on it. Speaking of which, as a young adult, I could say that you're young again. By a lot of people's measures, you are successful. And being listed in Forbes and working for Microsoft and running your own company. But I'm always curious about how does Maika define success?
Success is a tough one for me because I feel I'm quite hard on myself, like many other young people, that no matter what I achieve, there's some way I could have done it better, or there's some way I could have improved that, or maybe it just wasn't good enough for me to present it to the world and that kind of thing. And as you get older, you realize you can't let those fears stop you from delivering and and shipping product and so on. So even still today, I question a lot about how am I doing, that kind of thing. But for me, I think success is a variable. It changes based on my mood, which is totally fine. If I'm happy one day, then yeah, I'm feeling great. Life is good. If I'm sad one day, maybe I feel like I need to work a lot harder. It's hard to say, but so to kind of give myself a benchmark, I like to say success is achieving the goals that I set out for myself, whether I wrote them down, whether I told myself. If I'm just able to complete something that I start, even that I consider a success. Even folding my laundry, sometimes I consider a success, right? Because something you started. So yeah, it's quite variable. But yeah, it's one of those terms that is kind of philosophical for me.
Yeah, and again, I ask it. Lots of people define it, and I always think it's really important to define it for yourself, because success looks very different for me than it does for lots of other people. It's funny when you mention folding laundry. There's a book and a concept called "Make the Bed," about that encourages people to make their beds because actually you've just accomplished something that sets you up for great success in the day and all of those things. And
yes,
I've tried to get my children, make your bed. Trust me, it works. It's been proven. Go and do it. And I like the idea that it's variable because success may be different this week than last week. And in terms of for me, success is really about finding something fulfillment in what you do. There's a great quote, and I don't know the whole quote by heart. Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about success is appreciating laughter and the affection of children and but in the end of the day, making the world a little bit better than when you leave it than when you started. And to me, I think again that's for me, but success is certainly not always defined the way it's portrayed in popular media or things like that. And I think that's important to remind people. What about inspiration? So you have these lots of ideas and you get inspired here and there. What do you think generally inspires you to want to pursue one of those interests?
Oh, this is a great question. So I think it's easier for me to think about my inspirations as an acrobat because I would watch people who are leagues better than me and be inspired by their beauty, their grace, how easy they make everything look. And that pushed me to become a better performer physically, right? And as a physical acrobat, I think pretty much how to improve and get to where you're going because it's getting that trick or making it look effortless. That's that piece. When you get out of sports or acrobatics, you enter life, I think it gets much more confusing because you don't exactly know how can I, who might be a different gender, different age, in a different part of the country, achieve the same thing that some person that you look up to does, right? It's a totally different path and you're not sure how to do it. And so I find people who have sold companies, have created wonderful NGOs, but even a lot of my friends like around me who are just good people, they inspire me. So I have a different inspiration for every piece of my life that I want to improve.
Yeah, I really like the idea of just being inspired by good people around you. You know, it's why not? You know, it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing that inspires you. You can, you know, inspired by a little kid you see on the street or, you know, whatever. All those, I like the idea that it's not, you don't need something big to be inspired. And we can all look around at simple things and have it inspire us. I still consider you somewhat of an expert in AI. It seems to be, you know, you studied it and there's an element of it in what you're doing now. You know, what do you think is so, and again, now with ChatGPT being, you know, the trend of everything changing the game, even though there's lots of AI tools that are out there. But what do you think is kind of the next trend in the world of AI?
I think AI improving the processes that we have today has gone on for decades, and I think it's only going to improve that. So AI copywriting assistants are something that exploded in the last 2 years. AI photo editing, AI art is something that exploded last year, right? And so I think AI applied to a lot of things that we do in our day to day is going to change the game when it comes to things, even like organizing paperwork, even speaking to maybe a doctor assistant is something I saw the other day on my feed, right? Like the ability to consolidate notes from a conversation. And so I think just our everyday human life processes, we're going to start seeing it trickling in. Things are going to change a little bit, hopefully for the better. But that's my guess.
Do you see any dangers with the growth of AI?
Of course, yes. So many dangers. I think if we over rely on AI and we're not double checking its work, it's the same as having an intern that you don't double check their work, right? You don't want to trust it, even if it gives you 3 iterations of good stuff. You don't want to trust it to post something on your account on your behalf without double checking that, because it could be something that's detrimental to your company. And then the other piece is the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, where the data's training set isn't fair. If it isn't correct, if it isn't right, you're going to get bad stuff on the outside too. And so it's a lot of work all around the board to do, but it's, you know, people are working on it. Very smart people are working on it.
Mm. And what is the next trend or thing we're looking forward to for Maika?
For me, it's been really refreshing to have Webacy, because this is my first company that I've really started myself and really dove into, because I know what I'm working on every day. It's for the company. I'm excited to work on it and so on. So trend for me, I think health and wellness is big for me this year. You know, getting the right amount of sleep, drinking less, eating right, all the regular things that we think of as adults, but we just don't really focus on. That's big. And then the other one is probably, let's see, that's kind of the main one, you know, making sure my company is successful or growing in a good trend and trajectory, and then personal health and those two.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm hearing health and wellness for the company and health and wellness for myself. You know,
that's perfect. Yes, thank you. Yes.
All right, now this is I've got 9 final questions to ask. I used to call them rapid fire, but I'm increasingly finding they're not that rapid. So because of the way they're constructed, nothing to do with the person answering them. But so I'll start with one that a lot of people challenged, which was, if the movie was made about your life, who would you want to play it?
This will be my longest answer because it's a hard question,
Okay.
and I'll make the rest short. I think if I were to have a movie made about my life, it would probably be like later on in my life. So when I'm quote unquote older. And so it'd be whoever is the most famous, successful young woman of the day 10 years from now, which is a cop-out answer, but I'm going to go with that.
I like that. The future star.
Yes.
The future. And should stories always have happy endings?
I think that's unrealistic, but there's happiness in every ending, right? If you find it.
Interesting, because I've been sharing with movies with my children, and some of them don't have the happiest ending. There's bittersweet, someone passes, you know. And I definitely think that, yeah, there's silver linings to find, and there's still things that are to be taken away, even in an uncomfortable or unpleasant or sad experience. All right, here's hopefully an easy one. Do you have a favorite emoji?
Emoji? Oh, I like the face that has the eyes that are kind of pleading, like a Pixar character. I like that one. Yeah.
And can you name a favorite song?
My
Or
favorite
band.
artist right now is
Yeah, there you
Joji,
go.
Joji. He's a Japanese. Funny, he's an interesting backstory. I won't get into it, but he used to be a YouTuber, and it's totally different from his music facade and his music character. So, but his music is good. I like it.
Do you have a favorite social media platform?
Now I like Twitter. I used to be on Instagram more, but Twitter is fun right now.
Let's hope it's the top of it starts to work itself out.
Yeah.
Can you name a book that left a lasting impression on you?
Yes, it's How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. Cannot remember the name of the author, which I recommend this book to so many people. I really should just remember who wrote it, but it's very good.
Well, I'll put it in the show
philosophy
notes.
book. Thank you.
Can you name one of your favorite movies?
I just watched The Menu, and I'm a
Mhm.
big, fancy eating dining experience fan, so I really, really like that one.
Yeah, we just watched it as well. It left us scratching our head in a good way, and we can't. I think we're still trying to decide if we liked it or didn't like it, but the whole foodie
Yeah.
experience was definitely interesting. Can you name something you can't live without?
Water? No. Exercise.
Yeah, listen, that there's no right answer to that. Some people say chocolate, coffee. My son, the sun. All right, this is one I always like to end with, which is, if you could be credited for inventing something, what would it be and why?
Ooh, is this something that already exists?
Up to you. It can either be something that exists that you wish I had invented post-it notes, or you can be like, I wish I invented, teleportation.
No. Wow. That one's a good one. I wish I invented like a process that would feed everyone in a way that didn't destroy the world.
Sustainable nutrition.
Yeah, let's do that.
This is great. I really appreciate your time and sharing with me your story and those bits. Is there anything you're promoting or want people? So is Webacy, where should people? Is that where we should send people? What is it that you want people to know, and something you want to share with us?
I assume this is the place where I can unapologetically shill what I'm working on.
Self-promote.
So
Yes, that's
yes,
it.
Webacy is the company I'm working on. We're focused on crypto security at the moment and more in the future. You can find that at webacy.com, webacy.com, and on all social medias like Twitter and Instagram at mywebacy. And then myself, I'm at Maika Isogawa on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else.
Awesome. Maika, this has been a real pleasure for me. I really appreciate your time, your insights, sharing your story. And I want to thank you so much for helping us connect the dots.
Thank you. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. Please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss any future episodes. If you could also do me a favor and please leave a review on iTunes, I would really appreciate that. Remember, story matters and is the best way to connect the dots.